People were envious then and say Taiwan is a treasure island. There was a wave of migration.
Mainland women married Taiwanese spouses but took 2 years longer than other foreign spouses to get an ID card.
Mainland China is an enemy state of Taiwan, the only enemy state or the paramount enemy state.
We're not enemies, really. We're just a group of mothers, wives, and daughters-in-law actually living in Taiwan.
Taiwan recruiting mainland students also aroused political suspicions.
Many politicians might say this person came to Taiwan to steal information.
Deep green extremists always existed in Taiwan. They always castigated people from the mainland. Staunchly anti-China, but I think their numbers will decrease.
Good evening. Welcome to the Pearl Report. I'm Diana Lin. Cross-strait relations used to be rife with animosity, with mainland China and Taiwan regarding each other as traitors and bandits. Recent years have seen an influx of mainland spouses, students, and tourists in Taiwan. As far as the spouses are concerned, the first Taiwan people to go to the mainland to marry were the old soldiers who followed the nationalists to the island after the Chinese Civil War. Hong Kong has our own disputes concerning the issuance of one-way permits to mainland spouses of local people. In Taiwan, mainland spouses are fighting to shorten the time it takes them to obtain residency. So how do mainlanders and Taiwanese get along? In 1949, as the Kuomintang fled mainland China, Chiang Kai-shek took the troops with him to Taiwan. Initially, young and low-ranking soldiers were not encouraged to get married.
At the time, the government was planning a counterattack on the mainland, 3 years of preparation, and launching an attack by the 5th year. The leaders might think if they were married and have a family, they would lose their determination for a counterattack.
In 1987, the Taiwan government halted martial law. Later, it lifted a ban on cross-strait family visits. Having left their home for 40 years, the old soldiers finally had a chance for reunion. These retired soldiers were known as veterans.
Returning to visit their mainland relatives, because many are already old and many are still single, people would introduce them to someone deemed to be suitable for them.
It's estimated Taiwan has 15,000 pairs of veterans with mainland spouses. Most of the men are much older than their wives by an average of 20 to 40 years.
有没有舒服？有舒服吧。
88-year-old veteran Liu Nanxing relies on the care of his mainland wife, Liu Xixiang. He is 34 years older than she is.
I'm ill. She takes good care of me. She's good to me. I don't want her to worry about a livelihood. I give her my pension money. She takes care of the family. I don't.
Liu Nanxing came to Taiwan in 1947 at 22 years of age. He says soldiers were poorly paid, so he didn't think of getting married in Taiwan after leaving the army.
A soldier doesn't have much money. After the ban on family visits was lifted, I returned home. My brothers rented their homes. They were so poor, so I gave them money. After all that, I couldn't find a wife.
Liu Nanxing served in the infantry. Leaving the army, he worked and saved his wages, and in 1999 he met Liu Xixiang on the mainland. Liu was a clothing retailer and had a failed marriage. At the time, she wanted to get married and go to Taiwan because a fire gutted her shop and she faced financial ruin.
My clothing was burnt. I had nothing but debt, so I wanted to go to Taiwan. I used him so I could come to Taiwan to earn money. You take me to Taiwan and I'll do it. No matter how hard it is, I'll take care of you, even if you live to be 100.
The The Veterans Office in Taoyuan says Liu Nanxing's type of caregiving marriage is common among the old soldiers. 80% of the mainland spouses in Taiwan were divorcees.
At the time, it was mutual aid. The old man got someone to take care of him. The mainland spouse got economic assistance, money to send back to the mainland. It was much better than hiring a maid. You paid less. A maid was very expensive.
Besides the veterans, other Taiwanese also sought spouses in mainland China. The island now has 310,000 spouses from the mainland.
Many of us new immigrant sisters came here. There are also their children. Some Taiwanese love spicy food.
Yang Chen married and moved to Kaohsiung 10 years ago. She said her ex-husband beat her, so they divorced. She took only a few days to decide to marry a Taiwanese. Due to the distance between the mainland and Taiwan, this kind of quickie marriage used to be very common.
A Taiwan fad. Taiwan is said to be a treasure island when it was opened up. Those who followed old Chang over here returned in glory when family visits to the mainland were allowed. On TV, everyone has a small car and a house, but coming here, our dreams were shattered.
In the early days, Yang Chen experienced severe discrimination in southern Taiwan against mainland spouses.
The in-laws didn't let us go out and make friends. They didn't allow us to visit relatives, saying they were a bad influence on us. They used derogatory terms for mainland women or girls.
About 3 years ago, Yang Chen borrowed money from relatives and friends to open a Hunanese restaurant to support her and her 2 Taiwan-born children. She didn't have a Taiwan ID card then and couldn't even register her business. She says mainland spouses without ID cards would be deported if they divorced, unless they had child custody.
Without child custody, we aren't qualified to stay here. After we divorce, we must leave Taiwan within 10 days. We can't stay here. So many of our sisters live under this threat.
On this afternoon, Yang Chen attended a meeting of this association helping mainland spouses. Before, they needed a local relative to be the guarantor, usually their husband, to apply for an ID card. But Yang Chen has divorced. Fortunately, the association's chairwoman, Zhang Xiuying, fought to become Yang's guarantor so she could get her ID card.
The sisters who don't have an ID card are actually emotionally unstable, devoid of a sense of belonging.
Mainland spouses who join their husbands in Taiwan can get an ID card and cancel their mainland household registration after living for a certain period of time with their family in Taiwan. After Ma Ying-jeou became president, he shortened the required period from 8 to 6 years. The executive yuan has again proposed a bill to the legislative yuan to reduce the time to 4 years, on par with other foreign spouses.
We think by helping mainland spouses, we're actually helping Taiwan families, letting them live in a friendlier environment here.
The legislature has completed the first reading and the bill has passed to the discussion stage. But with a boycott by the Taiwan Solidarity Union, the bill has been shelved, pending a compromise.
姐妹们都是来自不同的地方嘛，然后来到这边，我希望说大家都可以有个一技之长，这样子喷。
In 2000, Zhang Xiuying came to Taiwan as a mainland spouse. 8 years later, she obtained her ID card. She then founded this association for new immigrants. It holds free courses in nail painting so members can acquire a skill.
我们先把指甲油握在手里。
Zhang Xiuying says it's very inconvenient not having an ID card in Taiwan. It's needed to get a SIM card, to get an internet connection, to register a business, to purchase property, and so on.
It's a basic human right. If we don't have human rights, can Taiwanese talk about human rights?
The Democratic Progressive Party says Taiwan has 450,000 foreign spouses. 70% of them come from the mainland, and the number is growing. It thinks it's appropriate for mainland spouses to wait 2 years more than others for their ID cards.
Inside Taiwan, people have suspicions about mainland China's threat. We can't simply say we should treat them equally.
Pan-Green Coalition scholar Xi Changfang used Helen of Troy as an allegory against shortening mainland spouses' qualification period for ID cards.
Mainland China is an enemy state of Taiwan. It's the only enemy state or the paramount enemy state. We need to consider national security. China basically has over 1,000 missiles, and the number is growing. How do we know what motives they have in coming?
We are not enemies, I responded on the spot. We mainlanders aren't enemies. We are not from an enemy state. Really, we are just a group of mothers, wives, and daughters-in-law actually living in Taiwan.
But the Kuomintang, which had wanted to counterattack the mainland, supported the amendment. Some lawmakers opposed treating mainland spouses as enemies.
Now, mainland China is not Taiwan's enemy. People don't think a mainland spouse in their village is a communist spy who has infiltrated their home.
Deep green extremists always existed in Taiwan. They always castigated people from the mainland. Staunchly anti-China, but I think their numbers will decrease.
A growing number of mainland spouses and students are living in Taiwan. What do Taiwanese think of them? More on that after the break.